Welcome. My name is Bob Mnookin, and I chair the program on negotiation here at Harvard. And it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to what I think is going to be a very special evening. I cannot exaggerate how thrilled I am that we have these two gentlemen here tonight to help educate us. I'm going to introduce them, and I'm going to get their public commitment right now about timing, because I'm committing to you that we're going to be done at 8:30. It's 7 o'clock now. And Gilly Sher has told me he's committed. He was is going to give the primary presentation, and he's committed to doing it in 30 minutes. Is that right?
Did you get that in writing? I'm following order.
These are final status issues. I've got it in writing. And my good friend Khalil Shikaki is committed to 15 minutes comments. I'm going to then take a few minutes to ask questions to each of them, and we're then going to open it up to questions from the audience. So that's how we're going to proceed. What I want to do is just take a couple minutes to introduce you to these two extraordinary people. Gilad Sher, who's been a lecturer on law here at Harvard Law School and a distinguished visiting fellow at the program on negotiation during the last weeks, heads the Center for Applied Negotiations and is a senior research fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies at Tel Aviv University. He's best known because he served as chief negotiator in the 1999 through 2001 negotiations at the Camp David Summit and the Taba talks. And he's also been involved in extensive rounds of covert Track 2 negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. I'm proud to say he's an attorney, and he's a senior partner in an Israeli law firm. And he's also an author of several wonderful books and many articles. His book, The Israeli-Palestinian Peace Negotiation, 1999 to 2001, Within Reach, really describes his experience as the chief negotiator. He just recently published a co-edited volume to which a couple of us in the program on negotiation contributed chapters, entitled Negotiating in Times of Conflict, which was published by the Institute of National Security Studies. And he has a new book, The Battle for Home, which I hope will soon be translated into English.
Inshallah.
Within Israel, he's the founding co-chairman of a nonpartisan movement called the Blue and White Future. Among other things, he's chairman of the executive board and board of trustees of Sapir Academic College. He's really a remarkable man who's had a distinguished public and private career. Khalil Shikaki is a professor of political science, and we've been lucky enough for a decade to have him be here in the Boston area in the fall, because he is a senior fellow at the Crown Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Brandeis. He completed his PhD in political science from Columbia University in 1985 and has taught at several Palestinian and American universities. Between 96 and 99, he served as Dean of Scientific Research at Najab University in Nablus. He's been a visiting fellow at Brookings. And most recently, he and Shai Feldman, who's here in the audience and is the head of the Crown Center at Brandeis, with a third colleague, published the first book on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a marvelous book co-authored by a Palestinian, an Egyptian, and an Israeli-American. Shai, I'm characterizing you that way. Most importantly, Dr. Shikaki is the leading social science pollster in terms of the Palestinian territories. He has courageously published all kinds of interesting surveys And he's a man who is committed to describing the reality of what attitudes of Palestinians are. It's sometimes good news, sometimes it's not so good news, but he always gives it to everybody straight, and he's widely admired for that. He's published a great deal. I won't go through all that he's published, but I think we're certainly here going to have we're going to learn a lot from both these gentlemen tonight. Gilly, why don't you step up here and begin? I will turn on my clock and give you at least a signal before the half hour's up.
Okay. So, good evening to all of you. I don't know, I just commented to my friend Khalil here that the full house is due to either you being hopeless or hopeful. And so we'll see about that later. Anyway, Bob, thank you very much for your very kind introduction. And thank you, Susan and Polly, and all of PON staff here for hosting this event. I would like to start with a very short clip and then recap from there. No, that's not this. Not exactly.
Thousands of women have been marching across Israel for the past 2 weeks in the name of peace. And last night, they finally ended their journey in a mass gathering outside of the Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem. The March of Hope kicked off from the Rosh Hanikra border crossing between Israel and Lebanon in the north. The enthusiastic women held a number of rallies to raise awareness of their mission for regional peace as they made their journey on foot through the hills and valleys of Judea and Samaria.
Jordan, Palestine, Israel, to live together in peace.
Women from other countries also took part in the events, which included a lot of singing, prayers, and even the holding of a mass on the banks of the Jordan River.
أنا أول مرة بشارك في هذا البرنامج هو نساء من كل العالم جايين لأجل السلام. طبعا التقينا مع ناس من الداخل، ناس من كندا أعتقد، في ناس من دول برا، وهم كل هدفهم هو يجعلوا من العقول ويأخذوا فكرة السلام، إنه إحنا شعوب بدنا السلام.
Many of the participants carried signs expressing their desire to work together hand in hand toward changing reality and building a new future. Once they reached their final destination last night, scores of joyous women danced and sang their songs of peace outside the premier's official residence.
So Women Wage Peace, a movement that comprises by now more than 20,000 men and women, Jewish women, Arab women, Palestinian women, Bedouins, Haredi, Orthodox, secular, just name it. This movement was established as a popular movement 2 years ago during the Protective Edge Gaza war in summer 2014. As a matter of fact, 5 women came to my law firm and wanted to discuss what to do. What to do. I mean, they were desperate, and they said, we need to do something. Among other things, they asked me if I could recommend a former army general that would escort them in their so-called important meetings. And I replied, are you insane? No one has more understanding in security and in national security than you do. Go ahead and fight for your truth. And they did. In the last 2 decades, Bob Mnookin already mentioned, I've been at the negotiation table with the Palestinians for altogether probably close to 2.5 years. I'm talking on a daily basis, not counting the nights. And it was first under Prime Minister Rabin during the 1995 interim agreement negotiations, the Oslo B negotiations, and then later on in Camp David and Taba and other extensive rounds under Prime Minister Barak. So I've been kind of grappling with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the negotiations to, intended to resolve it for kind of close to 4,000, 5,000 hours altogether. So being what I would like to pretend to being a normative person, why in hell should I continue looking for a resolution to this complex, multidimensional conflict? Simple answer is that I cannot help it. I do care. And I'm a Jewish Zionist patriot. I'm the 18th generation on the side of my mother in Israel, in the old city of Jerusalem, a link to the Zionist enterprise, the Zionist chain. I have no question whatsoever on the Jewish people's rights to self-determination in Eretz Israel, in its own state, nor have I any doubt that the Palestinian people has the right of self-determination in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And Zionism never aspired to govern another people. Never, ever. So I cannot stand aloof witnessing the decline of Jewish and human values while the way forward seems so obvious despite all the hardship and the obstacles. I will give you right away a couple of insights that I would like you to consider. First, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict will eventually be resolved. And it will be resolved on the basis of the two-state solution principle. And we better do it before this political conflict turns into a religious war. In the absence of leadership, it is our duty as the civilians, as the civil society, as Israelis and Palestinians, to promote the conditions for a reality of two states, even in the absence of leadership, in the absence of an agreement. And despite 20 years of negotiations, there are, in my opinion, very slim chances now for a comprehensive resolution of the conflict, for the end of conflict, finality of all claims in one agreement that resolves all the core issues. But nevertheless, peace is possible. Peace is possible, it's doable, it's necessary. It requires political action. It requires an internal dialogue about peace and what should be done in order to get it in the respective societies, the Israelis and the Palestinian one. And it requires a preparation of hearts and minds to accommodate the compromises that are needed in order to reach peace. The status quo is untenable. Time is not working in any one of the parties' favor. Spoilers only get stronger. And I believe that the majority of Israelis and Palestinians still want peace. But the same majority does not believe that peace will arrive, will be attained during their lifetime. So we need a gradual process with transitional phases and a proactive approach to resolve the conflict and to counter extremism, indifference, frustration. I would like to zoom out to the greater Middle East, to the larger Middle East, and I will really rapidly skim over 2 or 3 slides because we have no time to go over all of them. That's the 1947, division resolution between an Arab state and a Jewish state. That's how it looks from, from a kind of a longer distance. Try to find Israel here if you can. But the most important part is this one. This is the West Bank, altogether 2,300 square miles. Let's say that Greater Boston is about 60% of this. And here, 2.5 million people live. Now, as you see, the area here of the West Bank here is divided into three categories, three different areas. First one is the main major 7 cities of the Palestinian Authority, comprising most of the population there. That's Area A, about 20% of the area. The kind of yellowish stains here are rural areas. They are under Palestinian civil governance, but overriding Israeli security authority. And the rest, this is also about 20% of the land. The rest, 60%, this is a grayish part, is Israel's. That's Area C, full control, security, and civilian control on this area. All the settlements are here, and all the strategic areas and locations of the IDF. Now, this map is the map of the interim agreement that was supposed to last for about 3 to 5 years until a permanent status agreement that resolves all the core issues is put in place. But this is still with us on the 21st year since its signing of this agreement. Now imagine the kind of friction, the kind of animosity that this kind of map brings with it. Very quickly, this is the last agreement signed between Israelis and Palestinians 17 years ago, the Sharm el-Sheikh Memorandum. That was actually the juncture between interim and permanent, and signaled the beginning of the permanent status agreement negotiations. Last agreement signed in 17 years. We'll go back to this map afterwards if there's any questions about it. I'll leave this with us in order for us to be reminded as to what's the most important thing that we have to achieve. What have I learned from my own experience and from the experience of others, the valuable lessons that could be drawn from other conflicts? First, always, there is a moral context for the conflict, for all parties concerned. Secondly, there's no containment of occupation or of foreign governance over a people, a society, an ethnic group. And tough and bloody conflicts, protracted conflicts, have come to an end because men create conflict and men resolve conflict. In Northern Ireland, I've heard Bertie Ahern recently, Prime Minister of Ireland, when the troubles were over. He said, what we told the extremists is that you can always go back to killing each other. So what do you have to lose? You have this option always on the table. And in South Africa, I've heard F.W. de Klerk saying that you never stop negotiating. Whatever happens outside the negotiation room, whatever violence, terrorism, opposition, spoilers are present, you don't stop negotiating. You continue until the end. And I also learned that facts do not count in negotiations. What counts in negotiations are perceptions. People are driven by their perceptions, their hearts, their guts. That's how they make decisions. That's how they vote when they go to the polling stations. In Camp David, for instance, in July 2000, I remember Arafat saying, Chairman Arafat saying that the Temple Mount never existed, that we Israelis have invented it just for the sake of the summit, in order to have a kind of a negotiation token. And by the way, this stupid idea is by now getting traction in so-called international fora, such as UNESCO. A distortion of history, but who cares? So I also heard Chairman Arafat accusing President Clinton to be surrounded by Jews. Madeleine Albright, Sandy Berger, Dennis Ross, Aaron Miller. And the suspicion that was around this group of the most, I would say, immersed people in the Israeli-Palestinian attempt to resolve the conflict. They were accused by Chairman Arafat of being of working for Prime Minister Barak and not for President Clinton. And we need to also, that's something that I've learned from Secretary of State Kissinger memoirs, that we need to impose our collective will on the reality and not wait until someone else does that. My current government, as well as the current Palestinian leadership, do not really want peace. They are not ready to take the risks that are involved in making peace. And the conflict gets more and more complicated. The narratives, the conflicting narratives are getting deepened in each and every side and every year that passes. And the core issues get more entangled, more laden, more complex, with all the dimensions, the psychological dimensions, the religious dimensions, and other dimensions that are interjected into this conflict. The core issues: Jerusalem, which is the old city. The old city, just less than a third of a square mile, okay, which is a sticking point in every negotiation, Israeli-Palestinian negotiation. Then the refugees, with the right of return, and the Palestinian refugeeism plight. Of course, territory, boundaries, settlements, the division of the territory, the division of the land, and security. Those are the core issues, and we need to plan and strategize a different path towards resolving them. We need to change the course. It is our responsibility. And I would like to present, of course, I will in a minute present a plan and kind of a comprehensive approach to going ahead. But first, I would like to mention a couple of points that are from an Israeli perspective. And I'm here, as I said, I'm Israeli, I'm Jewish, and I'm a human being. So I'm not presenting anything that I'm not agreeing with. Israel's long-term interests lie in ensuring that Israel will remain a Jewish democracy, secure, within recognized boundaries, but a Jewish democracy, meaning that this is the state of the Jewish people, the nation state of the Jewish people. It is a democracy. It's based on liberal values. It's based on progressive ideas, and it is secure. So how to ensure those values and how to make sure that the boundaries that Israel has would encompass those core values that I believe in and that upon which the state was established. I believe that the only way to doing it is throughout the division of the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, between Israel as a Jewish democracy, the Jewish state, and the Palestinian state, which would be eventually the exclusive state of the Palestinian people. And it is time for a balanced and graduated political initiative. It is time for us Israelis to initiate, stop being dragged. We are so good in science, in high-tech, in culture, in academy, in art, in agriculture. Where are we in terms of policy, planning, and strategizing peace? Israel must draw its borders while disengaging from the Palestinians, whether by efforts on renewing the negotiations on the bilateral and the multilateral front, or independently. In other words, with or without an agreement. We need to reverse the trend towards the one binational state and make it a two states, even with a temporary border between them. So the conceptual framework for an independent initiative could be part of an effort for a dialogue, a bilateral dialogue, or a regional dialogue. I won't talk about these because we know everything about it. A bilateral Israeli-Palestinian dialogue, or a regional dialogue on the basis of the Arab Peace Initiative, or any other framework for a regional dialogue, that's easy. If we get there, we'll know what to do. So, but independently, unilaterally, in a coordinated manner, what should be done? I think that it should include declaring a temporary border until the conditions are ripe for an agreement on permanent borders. It is imperative that we deal with the settlements, with the Jewish settlements in the West Bank, and it requires first a statement. Israel does not have long-term sovereignty claims eastwards of the temporary border, be the border around the major settlement blocks or along the security line, security fence, whatever. We have to halt settlement activity and construction outside the blocks. We have to engage with the public in preparation of the public opinion on the critical need to take decisive action for the sake of the Jewish and democratic state. We need a national scale planning for the relocation of about 100,000 settlers, up to 100,000 settlers. No evacuation by force yet. And we need a prior formulation of a national prioritization program for resettling citizens now living beyond the fence. And a legislation is needed for a voluntary evacuation, compensation, relocation, and absorption of those who will have to go. We need incentives for relocation in the Negev, in the Galilee, in the periphery, and we need negative incentives to the isolated settlements, those who will have to be uprooted eventually during this period. Taxation and other negative incentives. We need to encourage Palestinian governance, institution building, law enforcement, and all of these would be, of course, needed even if an agreement is attained, because the two-state solution would require a relocation of about 100,000 settlers. We will annex the major settlement blocks, and we will relocate those who live outside of these blocks. So when a two-state solution is attained, we will have to start planning? No, that will be too late. So we can start planning now. And if it serves a unilateral, independent cause, let's do it. What about security? Disengaging from the West Bank, short of a permanent agreement, is security tenable or not? In other words, whether it is possible for us to ensure security in the context of a unilateral, coordinated, independent Israeli move westwards without a permanent status agreement in place? My answer is yes. And it is not based on an opinion or an idea that I have. It is based on research, on analysis, on a very long process of trying to assess whether security is possible throughout this transition period. And my answer is positive. Yes, but it is subject to the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, staying where settlers are no more present. IDF should stay in the contour of the Palestinian state. It should stay on certain spots with a different footprint of the Palestinian area, Palestinian Authority area, and a different operational kind of concept, but it's doable. It's doable. We won't have less security than we have now. To the question that was put to us, to Khalil and myself, what are the options for the United States? What is the role for the United States? What are Obama's options? So I would say the following. With 57% approval rate, the president should issue a blueprint of what a two-state solution should look like. He might include boundaries for Israel and Palestine based on incorporating the major blocks of settlements that I mentioned within Israel's borders and an agreed-upon swap of land. This step, of course, would move us closer to an Israel which embodies a secure, democratic nation-state of the Jewish people and a Palestinian state. He should also encourage the steps that I mentioned, steps that lead to a two-state solution without having the solution yet in place, but while creating a reality of two states. And it is also essential to cast the insights from the Kerry's brokered round in 2013-14 into a political and diplomatic reality, so it can serve as a promising launching pad for any future negotiations. Perhaps the best way to achieve all of this is by a United Nations Security Council resolution, which will outline in a compelling manner the main attributes for an agreement. My final comments are as follows. Leadership, courage should be found within the societies, the respective societies. We cannot count on leadership, on political leadership to do the job for us. We need to do some consensus building within those societies, in both societies, for a historic compromise. We need to reach out to every Israeli, to every Palestinian, and make sure they understand what it means to continue for 50 more years with this conflict, and what it might mean to get the benefits of dividing the land into two nation states. We need to be very sure that we accept provisional, transitional stages. It will not be a one-off deal. It will be a long process with interim stages, partial agreements, and transitional understandings. But everything should be compliant with the two-state reality, with the two-state principle, 2 states for 2 people. Otherwise, what we will see in the future is an imposed agreement or an imposed arrangement, delegitimization, demonization of one another, and a lot of exacerbated hatred and violence. So, in order to save the Zionist enterprise, we need to engage in an internal dialogue. We need to show some national responsibility. We need to show some accountability to ourselves, to our own respective societies. To the Palestinians, I say, stop victimizing yourselves. Take responsibility. Decrease hate. Stop terrorism. Stop incitement. Address your needs, not only your dreams. To the settlers, I say, mission accomplished. Come back home. Some of you have done a pioneering work in delineating Israel's boundaries. The future boundaries of Israel will encompass 80% of the settlements, 80% of the settlers, which means the vast majority of them. The rest will have to come back home in an empathic way, in an empathic manner, and there's no other way. And to all of us, I do say what Bertie Ahern said. We can always go back to killing each other. So let's select our alternative for the future generation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
30 minutes exactly. Quite extraordinary.
Now let's see Khalil.
Khalil, we look forward to hearing your reactions.
We sit here.
I don't think I have ever met an Israeli negotiator who is as committed and as sincere in his efforts to make peace as Gilad Sher. I have known him for at least a decade now, and during this time, I think I have always felt that his commitment to peace and his sincerity in seeking it is just unparalleled.
Exactly.
But there are a lot of things that I do not share with him. He's sure that there will be peace. I'm not so sure. Palestinians are weak. Israel is strong. Why should Israel make concessions to the Palestinians? He wants Israel to do unilateral steps. That's even worse. If it won't make peace, if it won't compromise and get something in return, why would it want to compromise and get nothing in return? And you want the American president to issue a statement with the blueprints. I want him to do that too, but he's not going to do that. So, where do we go from here then? Well, there are things, of course, that I do share with what Gilad just said. There's no doubt that Israelis and Palestinians do want peace. We've just issued a survey, a joint survey that the center that I run and the Israel Democracy Institute done in last June. And it showed that a majority of Israelis and Palestinians support the two-state solution. And it showed that a majority of Israelis and Palestinians, given the right incentives, would also support a compromise along the lines of the Clinton parameters. So in theory, if indeed the American president decides that he will issue a statement, in theory, one can say, well, the two publics will support it. They won't. They won't because there is a tremendous amount of distrust involved. Our survey showed that the level of trust is roughly around 10% or so. 90% of Israelis and Palestinians do not trust each other. And trust is very, very important. We found that, for example, this 10% or so that trust the other side supported the compromises we presented them by almost 80%. 80% of the trusting people were willing to make all the concessions we asked them to make. Those who did not trust the other side rejected them. Israelis and Palestinians also do not believe that the other side wants peace. They believe very strongly in what Gilad's boss once told them, that there is no partner. This no partner syndrome is a very, very important element in destroying the ability of Israelis and Palestinians to make peace. I told you that a majority of Israelis and Palestinians in this survey said they supported the two-state solution. Well, majorities of Israelis and Palestinians also thought the other side does not support a two-state solution. It is very, very important to support the two-state solution if you want to make peace. But it's also, even more importantly, it is very important to support the two-state solution if you are to be willing to make concessions, accept painful concessions. We found, for example, that those who do support the two-state solution, in fact, do fully realize the implications of that and are much more willing to make concessions than those who do not support the two-state solution. Well, you'd say, of course. But over the last decade, support for the two-state solution has declined from 2/3 to just roughly over 50%. So as we lose support, as the two-state solution loses support, it also means less willingness to compromise, which makes it more difficult to sell a deal. The leaders, of course, are convinced. Abbas is convinced that he does not have a constituency that would support the kind of concessions he's being asked to make. Netanyahu, too, thinks that he does not have that kind of support. In fact, both do. There is significant support for concessions, except that these two leaders are not the ones who will be able to sell this deal to their constituency, not only because they themselves are not sure that they have a constituency to support it, but also because of their own political calculations. Their political calculations about their own political survival just doesn't give them the courage to move forward and make peace. So the two leaders are just too weak or have their own constituencies to worry about, and they are not likely, therefore, to lead. The publics are not an impediment to compromise and to a two-state solution, definitely. I'm the last person to say otherwise. But the two publics are not a force for peace. You cannot count on Israelis and Palestinians to do what these women did. This is a very, very exceptional case. The overwhelming majority of Israelis and Palestinians are not like these women. They do not have that kind of conviction and that kind of courage to do what these women were willing to do. Palestinians and Israelis who believe that there is a partner on the other side show a much greater willingness to compromise than those who do not believe there is a partner on the other side. The unilateral approach assumes that there is no partner on the other side. And it tries, therefore, to create conditions that serves its side, long-term needs. Israel tried that in Lebanon, it tried that in Gaza, Gilad. And although you can say that given the record, it is better than what things could have been without it. But you're not likely to find Israeli support for that. The Israeli public at this point is much more determined to prevent a unilateral approach. And I do not understand why you want a unilateral approach. You can use the agreement you have negotiated with the Palestinians to implement your unilateral measures as part of an agreement. Without an agreement, your approach, unilateral approach, would be highly destructive to the secular nationalists who are your future negotiators. Unilateralism destroys secular nationalism among Palestinians. They are the most important asset for peace. It only convinces Palestinians that Israel will unilaterally, without Palestinians having to make any concessions, pull out from the occupied territories.
I'd like to respond. Okay, just a minute.
Perhaps an American president willing to make a statement that describes the overall conditions, the terms of reference, can present your interim measures as part of the existing agreements between Palestinians and Israelis and push for those and bring Abbas to agree to those terms without necessarily having to make a new agreement. Without this, a unilateral measure by Israel would only create the seeds for further conflict in the future. It might, in the long term, serve Israel's interest in preventing the creation of an apartheid regime, which is exactly where we are heading right now. As I do not see a one-state solution as something that either the Israelis or the Palestinians will support. But it will mean continued violence between Palestinians and Israelis. You will get the Jewish character of the state, but you will get continued conflict as well. Only an agreement, even one that is an interim agreement, but one that is part of a package that includes an outline of a permanent agreement. I think only that can help provide for what you want in terms of the long-term interests of the state of Israel in being Jewish and democratic, and at the same time gives Israelis and Palestinians peace. Thank you.
Why don't we all?
Want us to do it?
Yes. Why don't you sit here so that you're not blocked by the.
Or we can take this down. The podium can go down.
Gilad, I'd first we'll make sure I've got my mic on. I'd like to give you an opportunity very briefly
Okay.
to make observations on Khalil's point that unilateral steps are not the way to do it, and that, in fact, would ultimately be counterproductive.
Right. So unilateralism, of course, is not the preferred option. Okay. Let's start with that. I'm for negotiations. I'm for a dialogue. I'm for an open discourse, both between negotiators, leadership, and of course the public. However, having said that, the ultimate high ground is, of course, negotiations. But having said that, what happens in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, when negotiation fail to bear fruit? What then is the fate of the state of Israel? It becomes either non-Jewish or non-democratic. There's nothing in between. I don't want this for my children and grandchildren. So yes, I am a bit concerned with my future of liberal Zionism. Yes, I am. And yes, I am extending my arm to the Palestinians, society, leadership, government. But there's no guarantee that this will work. So I'm looking at independent steps that are constructive, that do not negate negotiations, that do not negate the two-state solution, ultimately, that might act as complementary components in creating a two-state reality, in reversing the trend, this slope towards a one binational state. That is a disaster for Israelis and Palestinians. First, kind of flattening it, and then reverse the trend towards the two-state reality and create this reality on the ground. And if negotiations do succeed, either on the regional level or the bilateral level, then fine. We've just planned and legislated and helped this happen. If they don't, if they fail, we have an alternative. And the alternative is ready for us to keep Israel Jewish and democratic,
Well,
with or without a partner.
Okay, I guess what I want to do is follow up with one question, and then I want to give Khalil a chance to develop his idea too. Khalil said a couple things that were very important. One was that he thinks that unilateral actions would, in the intermediate and long run, have an adverse effect on the capacity of the Palestinian people to organize politically to do what's necessary. At least I inferred that. You can correct me. But he also said another thing, which you, of course, realize completely, and that is unilateralism has a very bad name in Israel. And the reason is that many Israelis view the unilateral Sharon's exit from Gaza as providing the possibility for Hamas to take over. and the unilateral exit from Lebanon, permitting Hezbollah to eventually rearm near the border and have the possibility of shelling. Now, we've discussed, and I think that, in fact, there's a powerful argument to be made, which I believe, that both actions were wise and, in fact, have turned out to be good for Israel. Not perfect, but good for Israel. But nonetheless, politically within Israel, it's very unpopular. And I guess the question that I hear being asked is, fine, what chance is there for this government unilaterally to announce no expansion of settlements, whatever you want to say, beyond the security wall, beyond the areas that are likely to be annexed? Would it be constructive? Of course it'd be constructive. Many Americans, including Dennis Ross, have been proposing it for months. And there's no indication that Netanyahu has any interest in doing it, nor that his government necessarily could survive the announcement. So what makes you think that, in fact, there's the domestic political capacity within Israel to take these constructive steps?
So there's two questions in your comment here. First one is the question about the capacity of this government to hold on after announcing such a dramatic announcement. And my question to you as a good Jew is what guarantees this government holding on after announcing that it goes with no preconditions to negotiate with the Palestinians a final deal? The same question goes here and about the negotiations and about taking any independent step, because this government has no intentions to create a two-state reality, and it goes on since 2009. Okay, it's not new, and there's no question about this government statement being reliable in terms of the two-state solution.
So,
okay, sorry, but I have to just to finish the second part of your question, which relates to the lessons that might have not been learned from the Gaza disengagement in 2005 and the Lebanon withdrawal in 2000. So yes, lessons should be learned, and most of them I presented here. Planning, internal discourse, a dialogue within the Israeli society between the settlers and non-settlers, the right and the left, leaving the IDF responsible in the territories that are evacuated. Just imagine all of just these three elements being implemented in 2005 in Gaza, planning for the future of the communities, relating to their psychological needs, subsiding the trauma, collective and individual. This was a very right strategic decision to leave Gaza, but it was very lousily conducted.
Badly implemented.
And it's not me saying that. It's a formal governmental inquiry commission led by former Supreme Court Justice Eliyahu Matza.
But forgive me, Gilly, you have not responded to the observation that I think we both are making, that there's no indication now in Israel of the capacity for Israel to make these unilateral steps, assuming for the moment that it would be a good thing to do.
Except for what I've opened with, that the public will be fed up in Israel with walking this crazy road leading to the destruction of a normal Israel with a Jewish majority and a democratic regime and liberal core values. And if this moment arrives, if and when it arrives, then, no government will be able to resist, as much as happened in South Africa, with the pressure from the inside and the pressure from the outside that led F.W. de Klerk to reach out with an offer that Madiba could not reject, right?
Except that the Israeli public is very comfortable with the status quo.
Of course.
And it will remain so for the foreseeable future. You're counting on a public that is, on the one hand, very comfortable with the status quo. On the other hand, very distrusting of the Palestinians. And looking at the region doesn't seem to really want to take any risks. And you are asking it to forget what happened in Lebanon and in Gaza and to just have a leap of faith and do what you're asking them to do. I think this is indeed in the strategic interest of the State of Israel. This is no doubt the only way to prevent the creation of this apartheid regime that you are worried about, or the one-state solution that you do not want. But any Israeli government that considers doing that, assuming that things do change, assuming that this government changes, and you have one that is more to your liking and one that would be willing to implement what you are proposing, and assuming that the Israeli public is willing to support that, why would the Palestinians cooperate with that?
Well, that's a very good question. But once again, why should we just disregard Palestinian rejectionism, terrorism, violence, and incapacity to negotiate in good faith with Israel in all major junctures in the history in the chronology of the peace process, starting in Camp David, and then Taba, and then the roadmap, and then Annapolis, and then Prime Minister Olmert's proposal to Mahmoud Abbas, and then the talks that Kerry brokered here, Secretary Kerry brokered between Israelis and Palestinians, and never, ever there was any kind of compliance on the Palestinian side with this. So why should we wait and remain hostages for your desires, for your incapacity to negotiate, an end of conflict and finality of all claims? Why should we? We have to take care of ourselves as well.
You're saying there is no Palestinian partner.
I didn't say that. You know that I don't believe in that, and I'm saying that in the major crossroads, there was no Palestinian partner to shake the arm extended towards it by the Israeli leadership. And I'm talking about several leadership in Israel. There was no partner to walk the way towards peace, to say once and for all to his own constituency, look, we have a lot of dreams, we have a lot of aspirations, a lot of visions as to what the Palestinian state should look like. But hey, we get a sovereign state, we get independence, we get the vast majority of the territory and a swap of land that makes it 100% of the territory. We get a capital, Al-Quds, in the area of Jerusalem. We do call upon our refugees scattered around the world to come over, build the state with us in the new Palestine, and we have a secured place to live in for the Palestinian people. Nobody ever spoke these words to the Palestinian society. And this is what I expect from a leader. You want to make peace,
Okay,
you have to...
let him respond.
You and I disagree on what happened in these negotiations. I fully reject your assessment of how the Palestinians responded to these negotiations. There is no doubt that this process has been, in my view, very progressive. That Israelis and Palestinians in these negotiations have been making progress. They haven't reached a point where they were able to close all the files. But in my view, the process, starting with Camp David all the way to 2008, have made significant progress, and the gaps that have remained between the two sides are very, very manageable. And that if the two sides are willing or are able at one point to return to the table, that these remaining gaps can be addressed if they find someone like the U.S. government who might be willing to provide some bridging proposals. That, I think, is a different assessment of where negotiations have been than the one you have presented.
Only partly, because I do agree that there was a progress throughout those years, but I disagree with your with your comment on bridging the gaps. The gaps did not get smaller; they got larger in the core issues. I believe
they became larger only after 2009. Before 2009, by 2008, the gaps, in my view, starting with Camp David, have narrowed considerably. And I think if negotiations are to resume from that point, at one point, the two sides will be able to reach an agreement.
Let me ask a question, because I thought I heard the two of you almost agree on something. Although I think you agree on a great thing. By the way, as a mediator, what I would give for the opportunity to try to negotiate the basic terms of agreement between the two of you, I think
give
2 weeks.
Give us a week.
Exactly. I was going to say 2 weeks.
It's
we could do it. But I think that I guess I have two questions. One is the nominal title was asking a question: what role for the United States? And what I thought I heard you almost agree on was that it would be you predicted that President Obama is not going to do it, but I think you both agreed that before President Obama left office, it would be constructive if you put it in terms at least spelled out the interim measures that might be taken.
And the terms of reference.
And the terms of reference. And I think what Gilad suggested was the terms of reference. And I think it would be terrifically constructive if, for example, the American president explicitly said that there should be taking the security fence line not as a permanent
provisional marker,
as a provisional marker beyond which there would be no interim expansion of settlements, period. That would be constructive. And if the president also announced that the Israeli government ought to take steps so that those settlers who voluntarily wish to come back to Israel proper would do so, that would be constructive, et cetera. And I think that a question is, I know that there are those within the government, within the American government at very high levels, that are in favor of President Obama doing this before he leaves office. What no one seems to know is whether the one person who counts, that's President Obama, wants to do it. I suspect Kerry would want to do it. I have every reason to think that the American ambassador to Israel wants to do it, and others might want to do it. But and the dilemma, I suspect, that President Obama faces is, if the parameters are spelled out, it's likely to get rejected by both the Israeli government and by Abu Mazen. So the president's going to make a proposal, and it's going to be rejected by both sides. On the other hand, I think it's extremely valuable because it's going to give hope to hundreds of thousands, millions of people on both sides who really are giving up hope. Apart from the lack of trust, which is a big problem, the lack of hope is a huge problem.
Sure.
Because people are sort of despairing. The political dilemma is, and it's a question, I don't know, would Secretary of State Clinton, God willing, who I think will win the election, would she want Obama to do that during this lame duck period or not? And I suspect that if she told him she didn't, he wouldn't. I think it's unlikely that she'd ever tell him she wanted it to happen for fear that that might leak out. But anyway, that's how I've just thought about this. But
it's unlikely for him to do anything in that context without consulting with her and without coordinating. I mean, that's out of the question altogether. But
do you both agree, though, that it could be constructive?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it would be very constructive for the reasons you have mentioned. I think a clear outline of the terms of reference for a peace agreement would be highly educational for the two publics. In the same way that the Clinton parameters were highly educational for the Israelis and for the Palestinians. I think it sets the limits, it helps the two sides to seriously, particularly those who are not willing to make concessions, to see these concessions as inevitable. Right. And I think that would be a very useful purpose, even if at the official level both sides will reject those terms of reference.
I want to, with her remaining time, forgive me, Gilad, I think I'd really like to take some questions. I promised that we would finish at 8:30. Yesterday, I committed myself, I'm not sure he wants to ask a question, to giving Professor Shai Feldman the opportunity to ask the first question, if he wishes to. You did not have your hand up, but...
He's got a mic now.
Here at Harvard, we cold call.
Yeah, I'm not going to give it up. I don't have a question. Gilly, I want to focus on two issues that Khalil raised, and I think these are really the critical issues. In terms of the lessons learned from our previous experiences in unilateral withdrawals, all the things that were wrong in Gaza, you were absolutely right. And in theory, the next time we do it, these kinds of issues can be corrected. But the fundamental problem that Khalil raised, which is that it wasn't negotiated, and therefore the other side didn't take any commitments on its part, is associated with any unilateral step. And the question that Khalil raised, I'm not sure you answered this. How do you persuade the Israeli public that is not sure that there is a partner on the other side to take all these risks in a situation where nobody on the other side has made any commitments in return? So that's my first. The second, and my last one, is this. The problem here is that in your remarks, you basically base this on the existing narrative that there is no partner. And in a way, the whole plan is based on this narrative, which means it only enhances this narrative. Now, there's another narrative on the other side, which this plays into. And the narrative on the other side, not by the secular nationalists, but mostly by Hamas, is that the only language Israel understands is force. And now we the Palestinians, have forced Israel out, forced Israel to make concessions, without us not having given anything in return. Now, the political result of when we tried this experiment in Gaza was the January 9, 2006 elections, which got Hamas a majority. Now, let's say that Israel is not going to be the only... Yes, Israel will be the Jewish democratic state, but the Palestinians may also have democracy, in which case Hamas can win an election based on the narrative that, in the end of the day, their strategy seems to have worked and not and not the pursuit of negotiations. And I don't see now, all the security plans that we have right now are based on security cooperation with the other side. Now, are we going to base all these on security cooperation with the military arm of Hamas? We have a little bit of a problem here. Now,
Okay, long enough. Thank you. Reactions,
Okay.
quick.
Okay,
Don't get
very quickly, I'd say the following. First, I do believe that we have a partner. I mean, there's no other way. We have a partner, but I'm not sure that we, either us or him or this partner can deliver eventually. So I want to make sure that I don't lose the very basics of my existence as Israel, as a Jewish democratic Israel. That's it.
No, that's
that's number one. Number two, you know, when there is terrorism and violence and shelling over from Gaza, etc., or from the West Bank and suicide bombers, etc., so we say, we won't move. We don't have to do anything now until this is finished and we get back to tranquility. So we don't do anything. We sit and wait. If there's no terrorism, no violence, no pressure, nothing, why do anything? So we stay where we are. We sit and wait. So my concern is that we need to initiate something that will be coherent enough to provide eventually a two-state reality. And we talked about, you know, the possibilities to kind of diminish the failures of former unilateralism. There's no such thing as pure unilateralism. We have to coordinate it. We have to coordinate it with the Palestinians, with the international community, with the United States, with whoever, with the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Saudi Arabians, etc. And we have to give a clear message. We are doing it for us, for our own sake, not for the Palestinians. It will be good for them as well, eventually. We continue negotiating. The door is wide open to continue negotiations. But we do take some steps, provisional steps, in order to ensure the future of Israel and the future generations. This is, by the way, a statement encouraging constructive steps to be taken by either party. By the president, outgoing president, is also good. Why not? Why not encouraging? Why all the time see the EU and other international actors sanction, punish Israel? Just provide a clear message that doing anything that is constructive, that goes in the right direction towards a peaceful resolution of the conflict eventually, is good. And we support it. And the Clinton parameters that were on the table just for a couple of days, because President Clinton, when he presented those parameters on the 23rd of December 2000, he said, when I'm out of this White House, they are off the table forever. So I need your answer within 3 days. Israel gave a positive answer. Arafat gave a negative answer. And still, the Clinton parameters are very valid today, 17 years later, as much as they were then.
Okay, I want to be able to get some other questions. So do you want to briefly respond or agree with Shai, or can I get other questions?
I do agree with Shai's assessment, I think. And I think I also agree with Gilad. What he is proposing is indeed, in my view, is in the long strategic interest of the state of Israel, the long-term strategic interest, not in the short-term interests. But it will be very destructive for the Palestinians. Destructive. And it will if he thinks there's still a partner right now, what he's proposing will destroy that partner, maybe forever. And therefore, the idea that this would be an interim measure, in my view, is not serious.
And the reason it would destroy the partner is it would amplify the conflict among Palestinians between Hamas and Fatah.
They don't need us to amplify this conflict.
The shift of secular nationalists in terms of the way they view the peace process and the relationship with Israel has failed, essentially failed. And a unilateral step along the lines that Gilad is proposing would give that a stamp of approval, that indeed secular nationalism has failed. And it will be either the secular nationalists will go back to where they were before, or that some other force. And of course, there are other forces that will happily fill the vacuum. And that will mean, internally, for the Palestinians, highly destructive, but it also means, for the short term at least, Israel will not find peace. It will find its own Jewish character, assured, but not peace.
So in other words, you agree that these unilateral moves would solve the so-called demographic problem of ensuring a substantial Jewish majority in Israel proper. But with respect to relations with the Palestinians, it would, in your view, make them worse. Let's get some other questions. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have a question after listening to this robust conversation. Which is a bigger problem, a lack of trust or a lack of hope?
There is no doubt that lack of trust is very destructive to your ability to make peace, because you simply can't make peace with someone you do not trust. Hope is not as destructive as lack of trust. We find that among Palestinians, when we do surveys, we find that those who are not hopeful about the future are still willing to make concessions in order to reach a peace agreement. But those who are distrustful are not.
Well, I think that lack of trust is a given, okay? But lack of hope is the end of the end of the process.
Yes, sir.
So for Gilad, because I agree with a lot of what you said, I'm sad to ask this question, but what do you think is the makeup of an Israeli parliament that would allow for much of what you've described that is also somehow realistic?
I believe that if a prime minister in Israel, from whichever party, would bring an agreement in principle that ends the conflict and puts a finality to all claims, even in a gradual kind of manner, like a process, but with very clear benchmarks and with very strict implementation, any prime minister in any makeup of any parliament in Israel, the Knesset, will vote 80% majority for this agreement.
That wasn't his question.
Okay. Yeah, I know. No, I know.
You can be a member of parliament already.
I don't want
No, the question was, though, and I'm
Just a
going to move
minute.
on, because I think that the fact that you shifted the question is revealing. The question was, what would be required in Parliament for a government to take these unilateral steps that weren't part of an overarching agreement?
I hate to say what it would require. What is required is for things to get much worse in order for the parliament to endorse such a move.
Okay, I want to get a couple more questions. Yes, the woman right there. Thank you.
Thank you. I would want to ask, maybe not about the parliament in Israel, but what do you think would need to change the environment in Israel? We have now persecution of left-wing organizations and NGOs. When do you think will be a change that it will enable Israelis to go towards a peace process. And another question.
No, one question. Thank you.
What was the question?
The question was what will need to happen with NGOs within Israel?
What will need to happen to change the environment in Israel? Because right now it's not accepting any chance for a peace process in the near future.
What will happen to change the political environment within Israel so that there's more support for moving towards peace? Is that fair?
I just need to persuade just a little bit more people, that's all.
I'd sure love to call on a woman. Are there any more women who want to raise their hands? Okay. Susan?
They wage peace.
Yes, in second row.
So I'm hearing a lot of explaining and very little questioning and self-critique. We're asking for, especially, or Gilad, you asked for the Israeli society to have internal dialogue, but I don't think we did that here, and I think it was very interesting to hear you say, you know, that you hate to say it, but something bad has to happen. I think those are the conversations that negotiators, or I would love to hear more about, like the more difficult questions that we have to engage with. So,
And those questions are?
like, what can we do better, or what can negotiators do better to understand Palestinian perspectives? Why isn't there dialogue? What can we do together to engage the U.S. government? And not just sticking to the explanation.
Okay. I can say that all three of us were engaged in exactly this direction a couple of years ago. So Jim was with us as well, Sebenius.
Shai Feldman?
And Shai was there. How to help the other party market any outcome without putting any kind of constraints and obstacles for him to do so. Helping the other to market an agreement of any kind. That's number one. Unfortunately, I think that funding was the problem eventually. But we did cover a lot of ground in that direction, and I think we need to do it. That's number one. Number two, within the societies, we have to promote dialogue, an internal dialogue on the future of that society. What's the common denominators that put people together and give them hope that things could change? Are we that far apart? And I'm personally very much engaged in this kind of dialogues with the most extreme rabbis in the West Bank, in the settlements in the West Bank, and settlers, leaders of settlers, and youth groups that settlers and non-settlers do meet very frequently and discuss the core Israeli, Jewish, Israel-Arab issues among themselves in a kind of a very systemic process with professional moderation, et cetera, and this is in Blue White Future. You can Google that. An NGO that I've co-founded and I'm co-chairing with Ami Ayalon and Orni Petrushka and many other people your age. So we're doing that. We're doing that. But
really,
it's not enough. But we have to continue maintaining open channels between us, within the Israeli society, within the Palestinian society, and between the two societies.
let me conclude just by building on your question, which I think is an outstanding question. My own view, which I've had for many years, is a primary barrier to the failure to reach a negotiated resolution is not that sophisticated elites on both sides couldn't negotiate the deal. It could be negotiated. People know what the basic parameters are. It's that within each society, there are profound internal conflicts. And those internal conflicts make it extremely challenging for a political leader to make the compromises, because many people on each side don't trust the other side to really believe in implementation. And so one thing that's necessary, which Gilad talked about, are internal discussions among Israelis and internal discussions among Palestinians about what's likely to be required. And the United States' role in all of that, I think, is likely to be rather minimal, because these are internal conflicts. With respect to the challenges across the table, a huge challenge is there's not going to be an agreement that's written down and then suddenly there's peace. There are spoilers on both sides. There are important stakeholders who don't want a deal. There are going to be disruptive actions. And each side has to be much more willing to think through and commit to taking actions to ease the burdens on the other side in terms of implementation. And I think that the questions of how they think about not just what concessions the other side should make, but what they could do to help the other side manage their internal conflicts would be a very constructive thing to do. I want to close simply by thanking so much. I think that this evening, I hope, gives everyone here some hope, because what it demonstrates most of all is how two very thoughtful and deeply committed and engaged Israelis and Palestinians can both disagree and agree on a fair amount, and are willing to, notwithstanding the frustrations, keep working on the issue. So thank you both.
Thank you both.